Welcome to Savannah Groves Church School. My name is Paul Jones, and I'll be leading our discussion today. I want to welcome you. I really do want to welcome you to our time of study and time of trying to understand the Word. We work very hard here at Savannah Grove trying to get the Word out that we can chew on and we can learn from and be able to sustain us for a time being. So I'm going to be your leader today. We're going to go through our lesson, and I'm hoping and praying you'll get something more worthy out of it. Today's lesson is going to come out of Matthew chapter 1, verses 1 through 17. And our lesson focus says, remember our unexpected legacy of faith. Now, this lesson, if you read the chapters, it basically goes through the lineage. So it's a lot of Adam, the names going from Abraham to Solomon to David to this person to that person, and we get that part of the Bible, we kind of skip by because it's kind of boring or we don't understand it has something going through it. But this whole 1 through 17 really gives the lineage of Jesus Christ, and it's actually a hidden message in it. And today we're going to talk about that hidden message. I call it a messy line is what I call it. Now, I want to help us understand some things. Matthew is the first book in the New Testament. Now, between Malachi, which is the last book, and Matthew, is 400 years. And they call that the 400 years of silence. That's when 400 years that God didn't talk to anybody. There were no prophets going, there were no visions, there were no miracles, there were nothing. God was just silent. And I wondered why God would choose these years to be silent. And I started thinking about when I want to say something or when I'm trying to focus on things. Like if you're at the movies and you're trying to focus on one thing and you hear people talking in the background, you hear the prophets talking on the visions and everything, you're paying attention to those people back there and you're missing the main point. And then there's also a time when, say there's a baby going to be born and everybody wants the reveal party. And so everybody's around chattering and talking and somebody will finally say, silence, silence, silence. The baby is a girl or a boy. Well, I think God is trying to do that right now because with Matthew being the first book and what he's doing, he's basically introducing that the Messiah is coming. So he doesn't want any kind of gray area, anybody concentrating on anything but what Matthew has to explain. So we talk about Matthew's task. What Matthew is supposed to be doing is basically he is going to give the lineage of Jesus Christ through the eyes or through the line of Joseph. All right. And I was thinking about Matthew and Mark, Luke, and John. These 4 books are basically, I guess if you look at it as if we were in court and we had witnesses to something and there was a witness on each corner looking at the same thing. All of them have different views of the same thing, but it's just a little difference, a little nuances to it, how they see it versus how the person on this corner saw it or this person on that corner saw it. So first, I learned that Matthew is considered his gospel is known as the King of the Jews. He's the King of the Jews. He's portraying and he's letting people know that this person is the King of the Jews. And if you go into the early Christian church, they'll show that Matthew's symbol is a lion, meaning that he, as the King of the Jews, also like the King of the lions, Jesus was actually the king. In Mark, he's actually considered the lowly servant, and that his symbol was an ox, being the burden of many things, the burden of the service and serving people versus him being the king. And then Luke looks at it as the Son of Man. And that imagery for the Son of Man is just the face of a man, and that's what the gospel has deemed it to be, or they immunized it with. And then the last one is in the book of John. John, his book is written as he is the Son of God, and his imagery is an eagle. So later on in time, later on in the book, it talks about a cherubim, which had the head of a lion, the head of an ox, a human face, and an eagle. So in the Bible, they talk about these things, and sometimes we have to go back in time or forward to put pieces together and say, okay, that makes sense. Now that's together, and it just covers itself. So when these three books are told, they make one big picture, and then we all see that it's about Christ, the life of Christ. So back to Matthew's task. Matthew actually, his job is to try to convince the Jews that Jesus is the Messiah. Now he does this in a specific way. He uses the Old Testament, which is what the Jews went by, as proof. He went back and showed that there's prophecy that says that Jesus is going to be born this way, or Jesus is going to do this, or Jesus is going to do that. And then when he gives them the proof, he kind of puts it in their face that, hey, if your book was true back then it has to be true right now. So that means Jesus is the Messiah. So that's what he was trying to do, was just trying to establish Jesus's line of royalty, who he came from, and why he is considered the Messiah. Trying to prove the case that he's the Messiah. Like I said, I'm going to read some of the verses, and I'm going to skip around a little bit, but you'll get the gist of what I'm trying to explain to you, because it really is just a line by line, who was born here, who was born here, and who was born here. And like I said, sometimes it's not so fun to read, but you know, it has a purpose. All right. In the book of Luke, I know we're talking Matthew, but in the book of Luke, Luke actually does the lineage of Jesus Christ through Mary. And it's significant because Matthew does through Joseph, and then Luke does through Mary, because in the prophecy it says is that the Messiah will come from the King of David. So they actually trace back all the way to where David is on both sides. So, and Jesus also known as the son of David. He wasn't David's son, but he was out of David's lineage. And we all know that Jesus Christ was born of the Father. He wasn't born of Joseph, and he was also birthed by Mary. But it's interesting that we think about, there's a verse that probably everybody's seen. If they had a Christmas card or a Christmas time area, you always hear this verse. And the verse is, is Isaiah 9, verse 6. And what that verse says is that, for a child will be born of us, and a son will be given to us, and the government will be on his shoulders. We will name him Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, and Prince of Peace. I'm going to read that part again. The first part says, for a child will be born for us, a son will be given to us, and the government will be on his shoulders. So what that's saying, and that was a prophecy, saying that there's going to be the Messiah, but he's going to be born by a virgin, but yet he's going to be given to a father. Meaning Joseph was I guess he was not a stepfather, but he adopted Jesus Christ. So he was given to Joseph, but born from Mary. And people don't really get that. They heard that verse before. We're giving a son, birth a son and giving a son. But you don't really look at the words. You got to look at the words separately and understand what it means. And basically, that's the prophecy that this child, how Jesus was born, he was actually born, but he was also adopted. So that right there is the prophecy that Matthew was trying to throw out to him, let people know that, this is the real Christ. This is the real Messiah. So all these names they really have some kind of meaning, or some kind of just a connection, so we can see that in both situations, Matthew and Luke, that the lineage is correct. So once we've identified the lineage is correct, you should be able to accept that the outcome. So that's what Matthew is trying to do. Is this 17 sections, as I'm going to go ahead and read it, start reading it. It says, I'm going to start with Matthew verse 1. Start 1. It says, this is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob, the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah, the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez was the father of Hezron, begot Esrom, and Esrom begot Aram, and Aram begat Amminadab, and Amminadab begot Lason, and Lason begot Salmon. That's kind of a fish, but it is his name, Salmon. And Salmon begot Boaz of Rachab, and Boaz begat Obed of Ruth, and Obed begat Jesse. Now I'm going to skip down because there's going to be a whole lot of these begots and all that. But I want to get to the part where it's really the meat of what we're talking about. We're going to talk about. So I'm going to jump down to 15. It says, Achim and the father of Elihud, Elihud the father of Eleazar, Eleazar the father of Matthan, Matthan the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Joseph, and Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, and Mary was the mother of Jesus, who is called Messiah. Thus there were 14 generations in all from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile to Babylon, and 14 from the exile to the Messiah. So I kind of skipped some names, and they're probably glad I did skip them because I was messing them up pretty bad. But the gist of it brought it all the way down to Jacob, who's the father of Joseph, and he was the husband of Mary. And then the last part, it seems like it's just kind of thrown in, but there's actually a reason why they put that in. I'm going to read it again. It's verse 17. It says, thus there were 14 generations in all from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile to Babylon, and 14 from the exile to the Messiah. Now, why the 14? What's so important about this 14? 14 generations, all in all, it was 3 sets of 14 generations. And if you are trying to prove something, you try to get every angle you can, every set of proof, anything that can be used as evidence to use. And this right here is evidence that Christ is in the line of David. Now, we've already went through the words. We already went through the names, all these names and all these people. But this 14 is an interesting number. If you think about, in a lot of cultures way back when, letters had numbers connected to them. They signified certain numbers, and when numbers added up, it meant certain things. Now, in the Hebrew language, Hebrew language, I'm going to try to teach something that I learned. The Hebrew language didn't have vowels. They were all consonants. And in the Hebrew language, they would draw a symbol and it had like a little skew by it, which gave it a vowel connotation. Like you would it would sound kind of like a vowel. Well, David only had 3 letters. It was the D, the V, and the D. And David, in Hebrew, the D sound, it was Dalet, and then the Va, Dalet. So Dalet, Va, Dalet. All right? So we got that. Dalet, Va, Dalet. 3 letters. Now the numerical connotation to it was Dalet was 4, Va was 6, Dalet is 4. 4 plus 6 is 10, plus 4 is 14. So there's where your 14. So 3 times, 3 different separate sets of generations. It was 14 David, 14 David, 14 David, Jesus Christ. So that's just a little something added to the lesson that I learned, and it's probably something that we probably should dig a little deeper into. I mean, we always say 7 is completion and things like that. So numbers do have a lot of meanings behind them, especially in the older language. So now that I've talked about the backdrop, about why Matthew's kind of doing this and what he's actually trying to do. Now we're going to get to the messy family. Now, all right, let's say it like this. Everybody has a family tree, and everybody's family tree has bad apples in it. Christ's family tree had a lot of bad apples. Now, some of you may know the names, some of you may not. I'm going to go over a few of them, and I'm going to tell you what they did, and then we're going to talk about it. We're going to start with Abraham. Abraham was probably one of the biggest liars in the Bible. Twice in the Old Testament, actually in Genesis, he decided he's going to tell a lie just so he could stay alive. And the lie was that Sarah wasn't his wife. That's my sister. And why would he do that? So back in the day when a king, first was the Pharaoh, then it was the another king, Abimelech. Sorry, King Abimelech. Both of them wanted Sarah. Now, back in the day, what would happen is if somebody in power kind of wanted your wife, you find yourself in a bad situation. Most likely dead. Because once you're dead, then I'm able to approach your wife. But as long as you're married, it's against the law for me to be able to approach the wife. So you'll die, and I'll get your wife. So in order for him not to die, he was like, no, that's my sister. So, it's kind of messed up because Sarah's like, so you're going to throw me to the curb, because you trying to save your soul. So twice he did that, in two separate instances. So he was a big liar. And then there's Jacob. Jacob was a deceiver. Jacob stole his brother's birthright. He tricked his father out of his inheritance. So he kind of crooked too. So but he's in the line though. Now he's early in the line. But he's not what we would think he would be in the line of Christ. We also have Rahab. There's only a few women that are in this lineage, but they're there for specific reasons. But Rahab was a prostitute. And not only was she a prostitute, she was a Gentile. So you have a prostitute and a Gentile in the line of Jesus Christ. That shouldn't make sense to us because we're talking about Jesus Christ, the perfect being. But yet his lineage is kind of gone astray a little bit. So, and then we have Ruth. Ruth is another female. She's a Moabite. Now, if you've studied a little bit about Moabites, their origin was birthed out of incest. And that's the best way I can say it. And the line continued with the incest tradition. So Ruth was that. Ruth was actually born out of incest, and that line is a blemish compared to the Jewish people. But yet it's in Christ's tree. All right. Now, good old David. David broke 3 laws, 3 quick ones. He coveted a man's wife, he committed adultery, and then he had assassinated murder. He sent the man's husband off to war just so he knew he would be murdered. That's an accessory. So David, the son of David, he's corrupt. Something's wrong with him. God had to get a hold of him to change him. God had to use these people. God used all of them. Somehow he used them, but yet they weren't complete people. They were flawed. So, and then we had Solomon. Solomon, I don't know how he did this. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Now, I'm not being funny, but I'm just saying, I got my hands full with one wife. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. I can imagine the headache he had to have. He had to have headache. But he did it, But what he was that was a sin. He was a huge adulterer. In his time, that was some of the worst times in the Jewish history. It was full of idolatry. Idolatry was running rampant, So people had adulterous lives, and it was regular on a regular basis. And that was one of the worst times in the Hebrew history. So, but he's in the line, he's there. And then there's the last one I'm going to talk about, and because he's probably, I think, the worst. Now, he may not be the worst to everybody, but I believe he's the worst. His name is Manasseh. And what he was a sorcerer, and he did all kinds of witchcraft. He actually sacrificed his own son to fire for some idols. And he was actually a powerful sorcerer. He had the power to do that, and he was in the line of Jesus Christ. So it's interesting that we look, and he was longer down the line, and we just look back, and in all these trees, all these bad apples in Jesus Christ's tree, all these bad apples, but yet he still became a perfect being. And we sit there and we think about ourselves, and we think about our own families. You sit, and I'm not gonna call no names, because I have some homosexuals in my family. I got thieves in my family. I got adulterers in my family. I got all kinds of stuff in my family. I ain't gonna be the one to throw no stones, because I got them. But the thing about it is, the only thing that connects us is blood. We don't have the same heart. We don't have the same mind. We don't have the same spirit. You could just think about it. You probably could sit back and say, yeah, I got an uncle, he ain't quite right. Or I got a cousin, I know she on the bad side of the apple. Some of y'all got bad branches. The whole branch is bad, So, I'm just saying, I'm not calling on no names, but I'm just being honest. Nobody is going to come from a perfect lineage, because all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. So everybody in that tree has sinned. Now, some more than less, some more rotten than others. Some have redeemed themselves, some haven't. But even still, you're part of that tree. And at the end of Jesus' line, I in my mind, I started thinking, when you learn more things when things happen. So you can kind of look at it as, Jesus came out perfect because all this other stuff happened that got fixed all the way down the line. Because what happened was God fixed all those broken people all the way up the line, kept fixing them, and it finally became a perfect being. So we can do that with our family. We can help, we can pray, we can do all those things with our family. We can talk to them, they can get counseling, all these things, But it's not hopeless when there are bad apples in the tree. It's not hopeless even if there's a bad limb in the tree, because we have to stand on our own feet. We have to have accountability for ourselves. We have to talk to God when it's time to talk to God. So knowing that a lot of people get hung up on, they get hung up on these things they call generational curse. Oh, it's just a generational curse. I knew it was going to happen. No, it's not a generational curse. You chose for it to happen. You chose that what was happened before to happen again. Every person in that line has freedom of choice. You don't have to do it. And then when somebody always says, well, I broke the chain. Yeah, you broke the chain, but somebody else down the line could also break the chain. It didn't have to be that way. And that's why we as Christians need to understand that Christ is our crutch. Christ is the one that's going to help us break that chain, or if that's what you want to call it, a chain or whatever it is. But Christ gives us the ability and the power to go a different direction, because he loves us so much. God loves us so much to help us and gives us the Holy Spirit and all those things culminating together to be able to turn from those things and not have to be able to look back and say, oh, well, he gonna be like that because his daddy was like that, or he gonna be like that because his great-granddad. No, that's not true. It's not true at all. We have to stop saying those things, because what happens is we put it in people's minds and they start to believe it. This right here is the lineage of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ had a lot of bad people in that line, and he didn't look back. He didn't say, well, David was this and David was that. And can you imagine if he looked back and said, well, all these bad people behind me, I gotta have some bad in me. God could have been right by putting me here because everybody behind me had something going on. We wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be saved. We wouldn't be able to be saved. So we as Christians need to understand the same thing. We don't need to be looking over our shoulder. I said something, I just said it today. I was talking to somebody, I was like, I can't keep looking back because there's walls in this building. Now I'm messing around and run into a wall. If I'm looking back, I can't see what's in front of me. So you're going to smack into something every time. You know, so you can't keep looking back over your shoulder because there's going to be a hazard in front of you you can't avoid. You have to be able to avoid it. You have to be able to see it to avoid it. So let's not look backwards. There's a saying that Jesus was, and we talk about curse. Jesus had, through 32 generations, there were things and people were bad. Things were gone. Things needed to be fixed. But what God did was he took imperfect people, and I said earlier, imperfect people, and made a perfect being. And that's what he does with our lives. All of us have done something bad. All of us have done, you know, maybe, I don't know, maybe not y'all, but people have done things they're not happy with, they're ashamed of, they're in the closet, but yet God can still use them to make something perfect. And that's what he does. If you read the Bible, all through the Bible, he uses things that are corrupt, and because I think it's the biggest attraction. Because if you can turn a person who's already good into somebody good, ain't nobody gonna pay no attention to it. When you turn the devil into somebody that's good, so people gonna notice that. They're gonna be like, how did that happen? You know, so he has to make it grand or extravagant, and that's what he does. He takes the imperfect people and makes them perfect. I'm gonna close with this, and it's just a simple saying. It says that the heritage you receive is less important than the legacy you leave. Say it again. The heritage you receive, that means what you inherited, what you got, is less important than the legacy you leave. Because you know why? Because your heritage, you didn't do. It was just given to you. You inherited it. But your legacy is what you leave behind. So remember that looking back over those things, you know, because inheritance could be a lot of money, and also could be some bad things. You could inherit diabetes or hair falling out. You could inherit a whole lot of different things. But that's not something that you did. That's something that somebody gave you. But your legacy is what you do, what you build upon, and how you end your life and live your life. So remember, we want to have a good legacy. We want to make sure that our lives are left better. Something's better on this earth. Something's better by somebody else by me being here. Not just, I gave you some money, I inherited you this. The legacy is more important than the heritage. I'm going to end with a prayer. I appreciate your time, and thank you for joining us. I didn't pray before we started, and I apologize to God for that, but I am going to close with prayer. So bow your heads. Gracious, most wise Father, I want to thank you. Thank you for this lesson. Thank you for just this opportunity to talk about your word, talk about the legacy of what Jesus Christ has done, talk about the lineage of how there's no perfect person, and God uses imperfect people to make perfect outcomes. And we just thank you for that opportunity to be an imperfect person, to be used. So again, we ask you that you just bless this ministry, bless those who watch this ministry, and praying, oh Lord, that they got something out of it. Praying, oh Lord, that they understand your will for them in this life. And we ask all these things in your name, Jesus Christ. Amen.